Support for Carolina Business Review provided by Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of South Carolina, where healthcare is changing for the better. Find out how at ahealthysc.tv. And by Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services, with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
You know, it's not quite Margaritaville yet, but after what have seemed like glacially sluggish improvements in this region's economy, the rates of those without a job in the Carolinas has finally improved to the point where it has put both North and South Carolina in the better half of states with the lowest rates of unemployment in this nation, finally. Welcome back to the most widely watched program on Carolina business and public policy. And this time, as we analyze the most critical issues behind the headlines, we're joined later by the CEO of North Carolina's capital city, the Honorable Nancy McFarlane.
Major funding also by Novant Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care when and where you need it. The Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. And by Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join us and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. This edition of Carolina Business Review was recorded April 4th, 2014. On this week's program, Weston Andress of PNC Bank, Dr. Peter Brews of the University of South Carolina, and special guest, Mayor Nancy McFarlane from the city of Raleigh. And now, here's Chris William.
Hello, welcome to our program. Happy spring, happy Easter, happy almost summer. I know we're all kind of glad that nasty weather's broke. Weston, welcome to the program. Good to have you here.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've heard that unemployment is finally stabilizing and actually dropping in the Carolinas, and now has fallen below to the fact where both states are in a much better position when it comes to labor and workforce issue. Weston, when you look at the trend in unemployment, when you look at specific to banks and in your business, loan growth and loan quality in the portfolio, how do you square those two, and what do you think about?
Well, we think the economy in general is poised for reasonably strong growth from for the next couple of years. Actually, we think we have been through a delevering in the government sector, the consumer sector, as well as the commercial sector, and so all these balance sheets, if you will, have been cleaned up. And so we are poised, we think, to move forward economically. In a reasonable to moderate growth, if you will. What that means from a lending perspective, first of all, the competition is ferocious for good loans that are out there. PNC, my company, is right in the middle of it. We're the new kid on the block, but and we're growing our market share, but still there are more banks than there ever have been in this market trying to grow their portfolios. But the challenge is that companies that are out there today, are not taking. They're still sitting on the sidelines. They've cleaned up their balance sheets, but they're not taking a lot of risk, which is what generates loan growth. And so, you've cleaned up the balance sheets, but there's not a lot of risk taking, which generates loan demand. So whenever a borrower of that's a strong credit comes up, it's just a fight, an enormous food fight for that particular loan, and it's that creates the challenges for the banks or whatnot. You hope going forward, and for a really strong economy, what you need is some risk taking to take place.
So as Weston describes it, Peter, and as you prepare some of these brighter minds that are coming out of the B School, and specifically the Moore B School at USC, how are these kids thinking differently than maybe the kids that came out even 5 and 10 years ago now going into this, whatever this economy is and whatever it's going to look like now?
Well, Chris, thank you for the question. Just to add, from where we started this, growth, I think, is going to be problematic for probably a decade. And the reason why that is because we live beyond our means as a society for probably a generation. And we've gone through our deleveraging, but we still have to get back to where we were even 10 years ago with regard to levels of consumption. If you have a look at the growth in the last 5-7 years in our economy, it's the Bernanke put and the idea that we'll borrow to keep the economy going. And as that starts to go down, which it's going to have to, I don't think you're going to be able to replace it quickly, which means growth will be moderate. And I think that's kind of, the issue of it's a food fight for anything and people are not willing to take risk. If you go to that, that means that if you're going to get unemployment, or if you're going to get employment, you have to be able to do some pretty cool stuff. And if you want to know what's going on in the job market, as far as I'm concerned, is for the last 25 to 30 years, machines have slowly been taken over a lot of the stuff that humans used to do. And what we are now left with is the high value added jobs are going to be only things that machines can't do. And as far as I can see, that's either complex manufacturing and making of machines that go into the factories to do the stuff, or innovation creativity. And the whole game of humans in productive work has to be lifted, just as the game of what we are doing in the classroom has to be lifted. I think a challenge facing all universities across our country and the world is that this structural shift in the role of humans in productive work, the education system hasn't quite caught up to what that means.
Yeah, so let me, because you're going in a bunch of directions here, Peter, that we could really, as you said, we could spend an hour on any of these one issues. So, Weston, when you hear Dr. Brews talk about this, and you see some of the talent now that are putting in resumes at PNC Bank, do you think, these kids don't get it, or these kids get it, or maybe they're bright and they know something I don't know? What do you think about when some of these kids are applying for this job?
Really, for the last decade, what you've seen is, and this as well, there's been sort of, I'd say, outsized money to be made in the financial sector. And so the resumes have flooded, the best resumes have flooded into the financial sector. I'm not necessarily sure that's good for the economy or anyone, really. And so you would hope that that's changed. I'm not sure it really has, because today, we are getting the absolute best and brightest competing for relatively few jobs. As you say, machines and we need less people to produce more income these days. The efficiency of these financial institutions and other companies is far greater today. That's really what's driven the economy is a more efficient economy. And one other thing, to kind of take it in another direction, companies in general have been learned to sort of manage their assets more efficiently as well. And so they haven't been spending money on equipment. The equipment today is as old as it's been in generations, if you will. I think the average age of machinery that's out there is something like 18 years old, which is crazy. So that leads you to believe that there's maybe a lot of spending and potential growth ahead of us. Yeah,
and Peter, let me ask you this other question, even to take it in another direction. So someone said, I'm not going to do this right to give them credit, but somebody said, the jobs that we're doing now, we're adding another layer of frosting on the cake, and we're not doing what we need to do to build out the cake. Is that, you feel like that's accurate? Wes talks about all the jobs flowing to finance because you can make big money in finance. But what are you teaching these kids? And I use kids as a bit of a euphemism. What are you teaching the graduates coming out of the Moore School how to embrace this whole idea of innovation, but also creative destruction?
Well, where Wes is right is that finance is a very important support service. But unless you've got something to support, you're not going to see the growth. And that's basically his message. The growth is going to have to come from innovation. And as far as I can tell, when kids ask me about that, when students ask me about that, I say there's kind of two ways to the creative core of any enterprise. The one is what I would call the scientific technical route, which means you go to a really good school and you get science, or you get technical and you get qualified in a particular area, and you master the efficient frontier knowledge of that place. And then you go into a company that's trying to develop product, services, or solutions that are basically going to be offered into the market with that technical or scientific background. The other way to the creative core is through the industry or business route, is what I call, because this is not innovation in a vacuum. This is innovation in a market, with competition, with customers, with suppliers, with regulators. I mean, you pick it. And if you come to a business school and you master a function and you go into a company, you can spend 10 years learning about that context. And when you know that context better than 95% of the people on the planet, that's when you get the ticket into the creative core to get together with those guys that have got the scientific technical stuff. And those groups together are the ones that will create the new products, the new services, the new solutions that currently don't exist. That's a much higher level of capability and preparation that gets produced in that sort of story. And that also then means that we're not going to create hundreds of thousands of people doing that immediately.
Right.
And that's why it's going to take a while.
You know, I wish we had more time, and I hope you'll both come back so we can spend more time on this issue. We're going to bring our guest in just a second. You know, one of the other, wouldn't call it a phenomenon, but one of the other revitalizations going on, if you look around major, mid-size, even small metros around the Carolinas, you'll see a lot of revitalization, re-urbanization, redevelopment going on. Next week on our program, we're going to spend some time with 4 people that know something about that around transformations. From Columbia, Matt Kennel will be here again. Matthew Coppage from the city of Durham. Pat Danahay from Greensboro will be here. And from upstate South Carolina in Greenville, also who has been here before, Ben Haskew will be here on our program. And we're going to be talking about urban redevelopment and all things around that, because it certainly has been something to notice and to watch. A short time ago, when many were genuinely stunned and astonished by the federal charges, the arrest and the resignation of Charlotte's mayor, it was once again apparent how important a city's chief executive plays and in the life and the development of a metropolitan community. Whether it is a strong mayor or a strong manager form of government, the person at the top of this body politic in any urban area can exert enormous influence, good and bad. In her first term as Raleigh's mayor, we welcome now the Honorable Nancy McFarlane. Your Honor, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. Honored to be here.
Good to have you here. Not going to spend a lot of time on what happened with the Charlotte mayor, but when you read about this, when you see this, and you maybe cringe for what happened, but when you think about Raleigh and when you think about City Council, of which you spent some time on, do you think this is bad for all of us? Because how would you fill that in?
Well, it is bad for all of us, and it really is, because there are so many people that work so hard, because this truly is public service. You know, it's in North Carolina, it's considered a part-time job. I know it is in Raleigh. I can tell you that it's not a part-time job, but I think people sometimes make assumptions, and it not only reflects poorly on us, but I think it also causes people to become less engaged. You know, if they have more mistrust, we need people engaged to make the process work.
You know, this is going to seem like an obvious question, but does it reinforce what people think about the talent that are actually applying for those public service jobs? Do people say, well, see, this is the point. This is why I don't want to go into it. This is why I don't want to get engaged.
I guess people can make assumptions like that, but I guess if you step back and look at it, there are people that maybe don't behave appropriately in all walks of life, no matter what their profession is. I think that just in public service, clearly it's in the media and it's advertised and everybody knows about it and talks about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Weston?
One of the things that my company cares about has become a hot topic nationally is early childhood education. How, as a politician, which is in a what have you done for me lately world, do you address that issue, which is near and dear to our hearts? Everyone, I think, understands today that if you don't get a good start in education, it's very difficult to catch up and become a productive member of society. So, and where the dollars are significant that cities and states need to invest in early childhood education. How do you balance that with the political realities of kind of today?
Yeah, you're right. It is difficult, and it is incredibly important. And I think that I did learn a lot going to Durham and meeting with Mayor Bell. he has a strategic plan that is set out, and they talk about the health and well-being of the whole city. And we just had our first retreat in, I don't know, 30 years, and really talked about that. And when you talk about health and vitality in neighborhoods, you know, it's about safety, it's about getting jobs, but all of those things, all of those tie back to early childhood education. It's about having those kids engaged in as much as they can be, you know, on that level footing when they start school. So I think that it's really important for us to make sure that we partner with those organizations moving forward, and that's why in developing the strategic plan, I was very excited to see what Durham had done, which is they really formed teams, not just cross-departmentally in the city, but with the schools and the police and the county and many of the nonprofits. You know, we are in a county-wide system, and there are 12 municipalities, and then a great deal of unincorporated area within Wake County, so that makes it challenging to have, you know, very dense urban environments and very rural environments too. But I think that's why it's even more important to really get the right partners together, and I know that certainly PNC has done a lot, and we appreciate that.
And let me quickly follow up, Peter, with this. So you coming up to kind of actively through Wake County Schools, being on City Council in Raleigh, now interacting with the mayors in the Triangle, you almost made it sound like it's not about the money, it's really about the process, and it's really about participation. So could we get the early childhood, could we get K through 12 fixed in large part by just working together better?
Well, I think that's a big piece of it. It surprised me a little bit when I first got on City Council and saw the number of organizations that there are scattered, that, you know, that do great things, but you have to wonder how much, you know, replication is there, or are there organizations that don't have the resources that they need? And if we can form those partnerships, can we really find a way to better allocate those resources so that the kids really benefit in a great way?
Mayor, thank you for being with us. Can I shift the conversation to the other side of the productive pipe? I know that you've got an innovative cluster developing around NC State, just as we are trying to do with USC in Columbia and in other places. What have you learned about trying to build up a sort of innovation cluster, being a mayor next to a big university?
Well, we have a great relationship with NC State, and I have to say that that's key, because I've talked to other mayors that aren't as fortunate to have that kind of town and gown relationship. Nobody in the state of North Carolina, just to be sure. But you know, when you look at NC State and the kind of students that they're putting out, it's just unbelievable. Everything in all different kinds of biotechnologies and engineering. And then on their university, you know, they have the Centennial Campus, where we've seen companies, you know, such as Red Hat and Cree and ABB start and then just expand and grow into the community. So that is a great place where you see those different pieces coming together. And we really want to create the kind of opportunities that keeps that creativity that's coming out of the school in Raleigh. You know, whether it's working with them before they're out of school, certainly like you mentioned with the newest wide bandgap semiconductors, the amount of research that's going to be coming out of there, and the number of people that are going to be trained, whether it's, you know, engineers working on it, whether it's technicians. I mean, it's just, it's a $140 million project. It's just mind-boggling.
Revitalization's been really more than a buzzword, but real mortar, real bricks going in. Raleigh has been impressively out on the edge of this with the opening of Fayetteville Mall Street again, with now with this Dorothea Dix business going back and forth, and however that's going to work out. But RTP's new plan that's being rolled out now, the transportation issues around the Triangle. So what do you need to get right as you go forward and really bring the Triangle back together as one cohesive region?
Well, I think that exact statement is very important. You know, we're in an amazing spot right now. We know, I mean, we're growing by leaps and bounds, and that's great. And we know that we're going to add 1 million more people, that we're going to double in, some say, less than 20 years. So we can look around the country and see the models of other areas that have had that kind of growth, and basically know what we don't want to do. You know, we were talking about, I grew up in the DC area, we were talking about Washington and some of its pluses, but also some of its challenges. And when you look at a comprehensive transportation system for the entire triangle, which is built around light rail and commuter rail, which will be years in the future, because we really have to start with a good fundamental bus system that people will use, that ties everything together, because you can't just put in a rail and then get off and not be able to get to where you go. We're building our Union Station. We saw Citrix move right next to the station because of that potential. When you think about Research Triangle Park, certainly that was a model from the 50s that had a park with, you know, great large employers that people lived in the suburbs and drove to. And what we're seeing now is more and more people wanting to live in an urban environment. But you think about the potential of that being connected on a rail to Durham and Orange County. I mean, Research Triangle Park is the size of Manhattan. You know, if we have 1 million people moving here, you know, that just opens up the way for us to think in a different way. Yeah. So I think that we're very fortunate. We have the ability to get that plan on the ground. It'll determine how we grow and develop, how we develop in a way that supports transit-oriented development, so that when the time comes and we're able to fund it, put it in place, we've already built the infrastructure to support it.
Weston?
You mentioned that there could be as many as 1 million new people in Raleigh over a period of time. Some of those people are going to be coming from the rural counties where, you know, unlike in Raleigh and in Charlotte, the major metropolitan areas, there's not anywhere near the growth there is today. In fact, there's still double-digit unemployment. I mean, what are you doing as the mayor of Raleigh to try to incorporate some of the more rural counties that are, you know, are not benefiting from this urban revitalization that you talk about?
And you're right, and we're seeing more and more people that live in those urban areas, but they work in the rural areas. And that's where I think transportation is a huge piece of it. We do have a commuter rail line that goes through Garner and into Johnson County. And I think we need to really think about transportation is not just getting around in your city. It's really how are you going to connect all of those people, because many people choose to live in that rural area. You know, some of the technologies that's coming out of NC State, you know, manufacturing is not necessarily going to be the same kind of manufacturing that we thought about in the past. Similarly with agriculture, you know, some of the things that are coming out of NC State are phenomenal. And I think we really need to pull on our university resources more and just think in different ways. How do we not only take those opportunities to those rural areas, but find out ways that people in the rural areas can connect with the metropolitan areas for jobs.
And it's my impression, I mean, not my impression, the governor is working with the transportation department to, I think, create a long-term transportation plan that connects a lot of these rural areas to Raleigh and Charlotte, and even, you know, some metropolitan areas outside of the state where there are job bases that they can commute to.
Yeah, we actually have had that conversation. So, yeah, and I think that you're seeing some of that modeling going around the country. So I think it's a great idea.
We have about a minute and a half.
So can I ask a very quick question
Sure.
on clustering? I mean, one of the conversations I think that's also important is not just at the mayoral level, but also at the state level. Do you see any gains for the people in North Carolina and South Carolina and Georgia getting together to find out what their niches are, and then coming together to try and find a regional strategy as opposed to just state or, you know, city?
Yeah, yes. I mean, we certainly have things that are key to us. As in, I went to Austin, Texas for South by Southwest, and what struck me was how many people are moving there from California, because it feels like California. You know, they've got a lot of similarities. So you're right. You know, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Virginia also have a lot of similarities, whether it's physical, whether it's the type of industry that we're looking at. I mean, I will tell you that I hear more requests for the high-speed rail to be able to get to New York City for work or for pleasure or whatever. But that's probably, you know, if I just had the high speed to get to DC and New York. So I think that there's Could be a great advantage to working with other states.
Mayor, thank you for being on the program. Please come back, because
Love to.
so much going on that I know you're out in front of that we didn't get you a chance to talk about. But thank you for being on the
Thanks
program.
for having me.
Good
Love
luck.
to come back.
Good luck. Absolutely. Peter, same thing as well. Weston, would love to have you both back. Please do.
Thank you.
And I didn't ask you about your Carolina, and Duke thing, so we'll talk about that later. Until next weekend, I'm Chris William. Have a good weekend. Good night.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review was provided by the Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join us and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Novant Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care when and where you need it. Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services, with more than 300 operations in 35 countries. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of South Carolina, where healthcare is changing for the better. Find out how at ahealthysc.tv. And by viewers like you. Thank you. Promotional consideration provided by Business North Carolina Magazine. For more information, visit carolinabusinessreview.com.